It being 7 o'clock, we are called to order. Meet and greet socializing, we've done that. I want to start with, as most of you, I presume, know, Ron Smith, who's been a longtime member, became a silent key last Sunday, the 24th of September. If you would please stand up and let's just observe a moment of silence in remembrance of Ron. Okay, thank you. Go ahead and be seated if you would, please. Meet and greet in the name of expediency. Let's skip that because everybody knows who everybody is. Do we have any guests or visitors? Or we can do the meet and greet. At least I got a response. That's awesome. We'll do the meet and greet. I'm John, N7NWL. I'm president of CADXA.
I'm Gary, W0AW.
Richard, N7NT.
Tom, NQ7R.
Mike, N7MW.
Bob, K7BHM.
Norm, N9AV.
Walt, NJHG.
Thomas, NE7X.
Bill, Alpha 4 Quebec.
Ron, W0KDS.
Ingrid, W7ISG.
Reinhardt, K7RGG.
Steve, K7SP.
Jim, KC1BB.
Gary, KC7CS. Wes, N7WS in Tucson.
Israel, K7 and all.
Ned, AA7A.
Virgil, K7VZ.
And I'm Steve, N7TX.
Mike, K7ING.
Bob, NA7RH.
Everett, W6ABM.
And do we have everybody from Zoom introduced and checked in and all that good stuff? Moving right along then. Mike, did we have any new members this month? I don't think we did. Okay. No new members. Any visitors or guests either here in the room? I don't believe so. Or on the Zoom?
Oh,
Okay.
This is Wes, N7WS. I don't know if you're hearing me or not.
Yes, sir. We hear you.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Program slide. The first thing I want to point out is that having seen something on Glenn's presentation a moment ago, he and I both have excellent taste in the same photographer. So moving right along from that, sorry about that, Glenn, it just worked out that way. Glenn was licensed as a ham at age 15, and he's done a whole lot of ham radio stuff, adventures and activities, been on multiple expeditions, including the Vasa, Palmyra, Pitcairn, Boet, and earlier this year, Sable Island. So, Mr. Glenn, without further ado, the meeting is yours, sir.
Okay. Let's see. Share screen. Let's go to Sable Island. Did anybody work Sable Island this spring?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, good. Sable was a lot of fun. You know, every expedition I go on, I say, this one was the best one ever. Well, this was a lot of fun too. We went in March, and it was a riot. I really enjoyed it a lot, and it's famous for the wild horses on Sable. And there were 8 of us that went. back in March. And Sable is about 300 kilometers basically east of Halifax. It's a big sandbar out in the ocean. It's about 43 kilometers long and about a half-mile wide. And the site there, you can kind of see where the arrow is pointing to. But it's just a big sandbar. It's called the Graveyard of the Atlantic. There's been over 400 shipwrecks there since 1500 that have been documented. The last one was, I think, in the late 70s when some electronic instruments went out on a ship and it ran aground on the sandbar there. And there were 8 of us. Like I said, you know, most of these guys have been on a lot of de-expeditions and you see them in contests. So there were, it was a good team overall. And Murray, WA4DAN, was our fearless leader. And we were supported by NCDXF. And this picture is not just for that, but we're sporting our new our clothing. We had some hooded sweatshirts and some beanies that were new to the NCDXF inventory. And they came in handy because it was pretty chilly and windy and snowy out there on Sable. Well, the permit took 7 years. It used to be before 2016, or I mean 2013, the island was managed by Environment Canada, the weather people, and you would say, can I come out to Sable and operate? And they'd say, how soon can you get here and how many people can you bring? Well, that all changed when it became a national park reserve. And you know what that's like with our Fish and Wildlife Service. Very similar, but maybe not quite as bad. But it took a long time to build up a relationship with the parks personnel. They didn't know what ham radio was and why Sable was unique. And there was a requirement that visitors cannot stay overnight. You can visit the island, you can fly in and fly out the same day. And the only time you can stay overnight is if you end up weathered in or there's some aircraft problem or something that you can't get back. But researchers can stay, and there's facilities for researchers. So we were officially doing ionospheric propagation research. And, you know, sometimes you have to play a little bit of poker with these people. If you want to take 8 people to say, I want to take 10, well, maybe we could get by with 10, and they say, okay, you can take 8. Well, then we're all happy. And but overall, Parks Canada was extremely cooperative, and they worked us into their schedule. This was scheduled initially in 2020, but the COVID shutdown was, you know, that canceled that. And then in late 2022, we were told that we could go for 10 days, but would have a 2-week notice. And most of us couldn't work that into our schedule. And so they said in March, the last 2 weeks of March, we can pencil you in and make sure that you go the last 2 weeks of March. And so that's what we decided on. So we voted to go the last 2 weeks of March when we can all schedule it. Overall, you can see that Sable isn't very high on the most wanted list, but it's really high in the single digits in Asia for basically all modes. And even in Oceania and Eastern Europe, it's surprisingly high in the most wanted list. The biggest problem is weight that the aircraft carries. We had to take our bedding, all of our clothes, all of our food that we would eat. Oh yeah, and some radios and antennas and coax and things like that. But the biggest problem is we had to get everything down to 2965 pounds total in 2 aircraft. So we thought our options would be best with a plane and a helicopter. And they both carried about 1,500 pounds. But again, it was really a challenge to meet this weight restriction. In fact, we all lost weight. We made an effort to do that. I don't know what our total weight loss was, but I'm guessing it was probably in the order of 150 pounds, maybe between the 8 of us. But it was weight was really critical. And at the end, in the end, we ended up being actually 1 pound overweight. And the helicopter pilot said, nah, we'll go with it. You know, can't be that accurate. But on the airplane, they literally measured by the ounce. And you can see they even weighed our toilet paper. I mean, everything was weighed to the ounce and stationed in the aircraft. So here we are, loaded up, ready to go. and the helicopter, same thing. And the guys in the helicopter had to wear survival suits. You know, all that does is just prolong the inevitable if you have to ditch in the Atlantic, you know. But anyway, that's how we went. And this is our approach to Sable. Our first view, you know, nice clear day. And this is what it looks like, kind of brown. The grass isn't green this time of year. It's still at the end of winter. And this is what the runway looks like. It's actually an official airport. It has an ATIS beacon out there. And I guess it's considered like an emergency runway for planes crossing the Atlantic. But that's what the runway looked like. And here we are coming in for a landing. And this is the facility on the island. You can see grass here, but it's roped off from the horses. And the population of Sable Island is 3. There's a park ranger, a maintenance person. There's a lady named Zoe Lucas, who's been there for 40 years studying the horses. And the building on the left is where some of the staff works. There's a building behind the radar dome there, the weather station. That's now fully automated. And you can see a building behind there. That's where the park ranger and the maintenance person live. And then the white building in the middle, just to the right of center, that's where the researchers stay. And that was our QTH when we were there. And this is the visitors' quarters. And you can see our antennas weren't very high. I'll get to that in just a little bit. But this is what it looked like when we got there. Inside, there was a nice big operating room, well, dining room that became our operating room or radio room, whatever you want to call it. You know, I'm a retired surgeon, so it's just, you know, our operating room. But it was a fully equipped kitchen, a nice living room, and there was a special separate room where we put our VHF and UHF and EME station. There were 6 bedrooms just like this. They were pretty nice, but again, we had to bring our own bedding and everything. There was a really nice sunroom that when you weren't on the radio or, you know, had some downtime, you could soak up the rays inside the sunroom. But most of the time it would look like this. It was the end of winter and pretty miserable weather outside. You can see it's pretty windy. And if you look at the weather when we were there, you can see the winds, you know, 45, 60 miles an hour, you know, on the right side, 50 miles an hour, you know, pretty windy. And this was just about the same time, right after Bouvet, and, you know, just not much different. In fact, maybe a little higher winds, but the temperatures were about the same. Maybe Bouvet was a little colder, but, you know, with temperatures like that, it's the wind chill that gets you. It's not the outside temperature or the wind itself, but just the wind chill. So it really wasn't that much different from Bouvet, except you could fly to it, you know, and have a nice house to stay in instead of a tent and not have this horrible beach landing. Sable is known for its wild horses. There's about 600 of these wild horses. And there's several theories how they got there, whether or not they were the result of one of the shipwrecks or else they are prodigy of a failed farming operation 150 years ago. But anyway, there's about 600 of these wild horses. You can see toward the end of the winter, there's not much to eat and there's skin and bones. They're not really wild. They're not afraid of people. They'll come right up to you. And there's a lot of inbreeding. And so they're considered their own separate breed right now. In fact, sometimes some strange things happen. We saw a horse with 2 heads, a 2-headed horse. And we did get a picture of it. You can see here. I'm sure it had 2 heads, like, you know, the push me, pull you and that you see in the cartoons. But anyway, you can see the fence that roped off. It's an electric fence that roped off the compound where we were. There's about 500,000 seals of 3 or 4 species that are on the island. They're all over along all the beaches. And the researchers had just left before we got there. They spent a couple months tagging all the baby seals, which I'm sure was quite an experience with some of these seals that are pretty aggressive. But on I'll say the interior, other parts of the island, you know, the horses just kind of roam. There's several freshwater ponds. That's where they get their water to drink. And those white dots you see are seagulls. But this is about the widest spot on the island right here where this picture was taken. And almost every morning we woke up to snow like this. And you can see the flags out straight, pretty windy. We put up our antennas. We had fiber poles for the lower bands, and this antenna for 80 and 160 had just come back from the Galapagos about 10 days before, and we brought it with us. So this is a veteran expedition antenna, and of course, like I said, it gets kind of windy there at times, and you can see how it's bent in the wind. And the antennas weren't very high. They're about 10, 12 feet high at the most, and they worked extremely well. And the reason is, you can see from this theodolite picture, we're about 45 feet above sea level. But remember, this is a sandbar, and there's basically no ground. So electrically, these antennas are 45, 50 feet above the sea. So that's why they worked so well. And we had 4 K3s and 3 KPA 500s. And we had more fun than anybody should be allowed to have. And I had just had my rotator cuff repaired, and I was in a shoulder mobilizer. So basically, this proves that even with one arm tied behind your back, you can operate 2 FT8 stations. So that's what I was doing there. I was doing 2 FT8 stations. This is the VHF, UHF station. That's Lee, W0GJ, and he worked 1 FT8 station on 50.313, and the other 98 contacts on 6 meters were via meteor scatter. Then he worked a large number. I think it was nearly 500 EME on 2 meters and 440. So that was his project, was the EME and VHF. And of course, we had some northern lights, and this is what the Aurora Oval looked like the first weekend we were there during the CQ WPX sideband contest. And we, in spite of the Aurora, we did fairly well. In fact, our score of 29 million beat the previous Canadian record by over 20 million points. So that was a lot of fun to do that. We had a good time in the contest in spite of the Aurora. We worked in a sequence of shifts that were in threes. There's a 3-hour shift, a 4-hour shift, and a 4-hour shift, and a 3 and a 4 and a 4 again. And that way we would slowly rotate through the gray line. And even though we had 4 radios, we considered that we had 3 stations. Usually there were 2 CW, or 2 of the radios were on CW, or maybe sideband or RTTY. And then 2 other radios were used in FT8. So we never had, we were in 3 teams, and there were 1, 2, or there were 2 and 3 people on a team. So that would theoretically leave a radio unattended, but we never had a radio unattended. We were always using a radio. There was never a vacant radio that I can recall. And we'd been eating our dehydrated food for almost 10 days. And this is the pilot of the airplane. She had to deliver some supplies to the Park Service, and she felt sorry for us eating dehydrated food. So she brought some steaks and all the trimmings. And this proves that even with one arm tied behind my back, when you're hungry, you can barbecue steaks. And this picture is not because of my cooking, but because of all the fun that we had on the radio while we were there. It was a fantastic experience, a great team. We worked well together, and boy, I'd go back in a heartbeat with these guys and back to Sable. The weather is really a big factor out there. And Murray has been to Sable 6 or 7 times, and he has never gone out or returned on any trip without a weather delay. Fortunately, we didn't have any weather delays going out, and this is what the day looked like that we were scheduled to leave, but Halifax was totally fogged in, and it was forecast to do that all day, and that's indeed what happened. So the Park Service took us out to the far end of Sable just to show us the wildlife and some of the old shipwrecks that were there. And while we were there, we were at that little spot marked the X, and Hurricane Fiora that had been there just the previous fall had removed about 2 miles of the end of of Sable. You can see this is GN03 at the very end where the island ends. And, you know, those two grids or that part of the island were no longer in existence. They thought that someday they would come back, but not sure. Anyway, that's missing the grid. Anyway, it was pretty windy the next day. It was clear, but very, very windy. And there was snow to start with that day. But you can kind of see the sand kind of blowing there, just like snow blows in the winter up here in the Midwest. That was what it was like when we left. And here we loaded things up and we took off. And I think the horses were glad to see us leave after we were there. There's a paradigm shift in how contacts are made. I was on both the VK0IR DXpedition in '97 and A52A in 2000. And between those two DXpeditions, we averaged about 81,000 Qs. And you can see that over half our Qs were on CW and only about 3% RIDI. There wasn't any FT8 back then, but 3% digital. Well, we made about the same number of Qs on Sable, but you can see that our digital was 52%. You know, over half the contacts were digital. And on comparing CW to sideband, we did twice as many CW as sideband. And one operator can easily operate 2 stations. And if we would have had 3 or 4 more stations that we could have squeezed in weight-wise, we could have done had some more stations on Fox and Hound mode. And you know, when you're working 5 streams, propagation is good. You can really make a lot of contacts an hour. And most of the time we were running 3 and 4 streams. And when we had openings to Asia, where signals were weaker, we ran maybe 1 or 2 streams to work those that really needed us in the antipodes. And you can see we made more digital Qs than any of the other modes in sideband, or CW was twice as much as sideband. And surprisingly, even though we're right in North America's backyard, we worked more Europeans than we did North Americans. That surprised me. I thought we'd have a lot more North America. And Sable is really a special place. I mean, it's a fantastic place with a lot of history, and the horses are wonderful, you know, to walk around. And I don't think we had too much trouble with DQRM because we brought some amps and Yagis, and that I think that really helped overcome things. We did a lot of RIDI, and I think this is kind of tongue-in-cheek that the best RIDI ops were the Italians. They somehow piled on exactly on top of the last Q, and of course that makes it impossible to decode anybody. So anyway, it was amazing working you know, JAs, VKZL with really, really weak signals on FT8. It's, you know, without FT8, there's no way they could have made it to the log, you know, with the weak signal mode. And, you know, we had openings twice a day, usually to Japan and Asia, VKZL, but they weren't as long as we would have hoped they would have been. But anyway, on the middle bands, they were really loud, and we actually worked some on 80, and I don't think we worked much on 160 for JAs in Asia, but we worked quite a few on 80 meters. And the Parks Canada team was really, really tremendously helpful and supportive of us. Murray had really done a good job, you know, priming the pump. They were very, very helpful. And the aviation people likewise were extremely helpful. And in spite of our severe weight restrictions, they got everything that we needed, and us and the radios out to the island to make it all possible. We had lots of support from lots of sponsors. And in closing, Sable Island, where do we go next? You know, and we have our sight set on CY9 St. Paul, and I think it's going to be probably we've been allocated either the month of July or August of next year to go. They won't let us go. Parks Canada won't let us go any other time except those 2 months. And it's looking right now like it might be the middle or last half of August next summer. I haven't heard anything about July, but it's looking like maybe later August will be the day. This is a video that shows what St. Paul CY9 is going to be like next summer. So this lasts a few minutes, so sit back and relax this excellent video.
This actually is what I would consider the quintessential DXpedition location.
The CY9C base is on the site of an abandoned lighthouse on St. Paul Island. The island is about 3 miles long and 15 miles off the north tip of Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. It has a little history.
We don't know. We think there's maybe over 350 wrecks. 150 years of the French. After that, the British, and then now the St. Lawrence Seaway. So everything in the Great Lakes has to come by here.
It's actually the kind of location that we look for. It's uninhabited, it's isolated.
Family of SEALs. Italy Zulu 5, Canada Mike Lima 5-9.
Our goal here is to make as many contacts around the world with ham radio operators, and that includes hams in Japan, New Zealand, Australia. We're effectively about 125 feet above the water here, and the antenna is just so effective.
JAs are just starting to come through here on 17. Maybe we'll get that opening, the 9-10 o'clock opening that we had in 2016. I hope so.
Everyone else stop. Is Italy Kilo 2, is that Hotel Kilo Nancy? Hotel Kilo Nancy?
What's the beauty of the FT8?
It gets through where other things can't. We're hitting rates of about 130 an hour.
That's 130 contacts now.
An hour, yeah.
We're basically on a rock surrounded by cliffs and water.
So really the only practical way in and out of here for us is via helicopter. It's an Airbus H120, 5 passengers, driven by a 500 shaft horsepower jet engine. Flying is really amazing, and I love the changing colors of the water. I love the exotic terrain.
Nothing like a pizza delivery on an uninhabited island, right?
How about that? How about that service? Wow.
It's just cool that we can talk to satellites.
Victor Echo 9, Charlie Bravo. Hey Dave, you're Fox Nancy 97.
These satellites, the ones we use, are low Earth orbiting, which means they're constantly going around the Earth, and there's only so big of a footprint, so when they pass, they, only a certain area is lit up at the same time. So what you do is you take something like this, just an antenna rotor and an antenna, and then when the satellite comes overhead, it tracks the antenna, and while it's tracking, you talk to the guys on the other side.
And what we have right here is the 2 meter and 6 meter stations. So over here we have 6 meters. We're running FT8 right now terrestrially, just working EA8 to 100 watts. Over here we have 2 meters, We're doing moon bounce right now. We got our azimuth and elevation rotator here for the moon array. And if you look here, you'll see these are all the signals coming off the moon right now. We're decoding off the moon all these signals here in the pan adapter. So we've worked on the moon this morning, so the moon's only been up for maybe half hour. We worked CT1, HZE, RX1AS, ZS1LS.
For non-ham people, what countries?
So that's Portugal, Russia, and South Africa on 2 meters.
All off the moon.
All off the moon.
We need to, probably told you we need to check 10 fairly early on. I like the challenge and just working with the team, you know, the camaraderie with the team members.
So after the 2019 expedition, St. Paul's Island, weather has been well, everybody's been good, and the ghosts, I haven't been here, but I'm pretty sure nobody's been haunted. A little static on the radio, maybe.
They chased the FT8 guys off. That's what it is. It's ghosts.
How is that for a sunset?
Yeah, that is pretty awesome.
Fantastic. It was just an unbelievable experience. Great weather, reasonable propagation, and most importantly, just a fantastic team.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks
Sorry.
again, man. Enjoyed it.
That was fun.
You're the best.
Awesome.
Well, that's where we're going to go next year, next August, and I'm looking forward to that a lot. And the only place we can operate now is that little island where the lighthouse is, which is where they were set up. So we can't use the bigger island because of the birds and nesting and things. Anyway, that's all on Sable Island. Does anybody have any questions?
Glenn, I noticed, of course, where you were, there were several buildings, and obviously they had power. How much power did they generate, or were you using generators you brought?
We did not bring any generators to Sable. They have 2 big diesel generators, and they alternate them, but there's power 24/7, and there's Starlink internet on the island. So it's I mean, you'd never know you weren't in your own home. You know, the power is pretty stable, and it's a nice warm house and with heat, and I mean, very nice.
Thanks.
Or questions from the group in here? Any questions from our Zoom folks? Mr. Glenn, I think that's it. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. And thank you for all the work you guys do. That's what we do from this end. And feel free to come back anytime you would like to.
And thanks a lot for all your support. And it's always fun to, work your friends and, call signs, most of these call signs I recognize, and it's always fun to work them. And Evan, are you still around? KK7MGL?
Yeah, I am.
Well, I hope to work you from St. Paul. And are you using that 7300 you won at Visalia?
Yeah, it hasn't broke quite yet.
Good. Well, I hope you can try your hardest to wear that thing out, okay?
Okay.
All right. Well, have a good evening, Evan, and thanks for everything you're doing for our hobby.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. 73, my friend.
All right, 73s. I'll stick around for a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.